This has Islander fans fired up. Yesterday, they played their second game of the preseason against the New Jersey Devils, and, well, we're just gonna get out of the way. It was a disaster of a game. The Islanders looked completely terrible, and yet I have never been more excited after a blowout loss. I was so genuinely impressed with Callum Richie. That is who we're going to be focusing on this episode of Islanders Digest. In addition, we are going to talk about a few other players who I thought I was impressed with and mention some players who I was not so happy with in this preseason game. To be honest, we're not really going to be mentioning most of the players who played in this game because it was an absolute clunker from the New York Islanders. It was really hard to even evaluate players because, well, the Devils played their entire pro roster for the most part, and the Islanders played one line of players and a bunch of players who are likely going to be playing in the AHL, and that's not a knock against them, but the result was a score that was, well, this was not a fun game to watch, and the shots were even worse than the score. I believe the Devils had almost 40 shots. Islanders had 13, and that's why this makes it even more of an impressive performance for Callum Richie, because in this game, Callum Richie had 4 of the Islanders' 13 shots, and he also had a goal and an assist. He really stood out in this game where no one else on the Islanders really did. And what really impressed me about his play was just how much he stood out in a game where really he should have been dominated, especially considering he was playing against some of the best players on the Devils. He had a really solid game, and I'm not just talking about the offense. Sure, it's always great to see prospects come in, get time on the power play, and perform, especially for the New York Islanders when the NHL version of the power play is so bad. And keep in mind, since they were playing against the NHL version of the Devils in this game, well, he got 2 points against an NHL caliber penalty kill. But what was even more impressive was how good he played defensively and how he looked like he belonged on NHL ice. And that's something, when I watched the 7 games from last season when Callum Ritchie made the Avalanche, while he was able to keep up, he didn't quite look like he completely belonged. And that was not the case in this game at all. I was so impressed. You know, it's so hard to evaluate how a player is going to look coming from the OHL to the NHL, how much what they worked on is going to translate. And it's clear, Callum Ritchie, we've been talking all summer on whether or not he is going to be in a form that is ready to compete for the NHL. He absolutely is in competition for this Islanders roster spot. We're going to talk a little bit later on whether or not I think he is going to get it, because this is a very complex situation, especially when you consider who the Islanders already have. But make no mistake, on half the teams in the NHL, Callum Ritchie is starting as the third line center, and a pretty good third line center. He had a quote about how he did in this game. He said, obviously, I would like to probably possess the puck a little bit more offensive, but the D zone, I thought it was pretty decent, and I thought it kept things to the outside. And I completely agree. I think he was more than pretty decent. I was really impressed with how he played. Again, also considering if he was to make the Islanders, this is not the matchup that he would have. He was playing against the top 2 lines of the New Jersey Devils. Realistically, he'd be playing against other third lines. Of course, he'd have shifts against these players, but the fact that he played a full game against them and looked decent is really telling, especially when you consider who else was playing on his line who didn't look decent. And I'm not trying to read too much into preseason games, but if there's one thing I was not happy about at all with this game, was how the other NHL players for the New York Islanders showed up, or, well, better way to put it, how they didn't show up. And the biggest one for me was Holmstrom. Now, I understand Holmstrom is already guaranteed an NHL spot. This really is not a major game for him, but considering that after last season when he broke into a top 6 role for the Islanders, and now all of a sudden he's already back on a bottom 6 role playing on the third line, you'd think he'd come into this game with more energy and show, hey, I can control a line, I can play with the puck, I can really push the pace against some of the best players in the league, being the Devils' top 6, which admittedly is an incredible top 6. There's a reason why they were passing through the Islanders this entire game, making them look silly. They are a very good team, the New Jersey Devils. Questions about them staying healthy, but when they're healthy, and they're currently healthy, a very good team. But I was hoping Holmstrom would step up and prove that he can really control the puck more and be more of a play driver on a line rather than what I would call a passenger. And in this game, Holmstrom was a complete passenger. He could have been erased from the game, and I would not have noticed a difference. And why this makes it even more impressive that Callum Ritchie stood out is because he was playing on Holmstrom's line. In a line with Holmstrom and Emil Heineman, Ritchie stood out more than both those players. Now, I will say, and we're going to talk about Emil Heineman in just a minute, because this is my first experience watching a full game of Heineman. I was impressed with his play. We're going to talk about that in just a sec. But first, I do want to talk a little bit more about what Patrick Waugh had to say about Calum Ritchie. He said, "It was fun to see because he was playing against a lot of high share, and I thought he did well. I never felt like he was in trouble, except for one shift where he had 2 broken sticks. I thought the line did well against their top line." And yeah, there was one shift where Calum Ritchie, I was actually worried he was hurt at first because he broke his stick, and then I guess he didn't know what to do defensively. That's something they'll definitely talk about in practice. Not a big deal at all. Not even a situation you are going to find yourself in often, but something you can correct. But beyond this, I thought Calum Ritchie looked great. He was physical, taking the body in the defensive zone. He knew where to be positionally. This was not a player that looked like he was getting by at an NHL level. He looked like he was above average defensively as a center, and that is exactly what you want to see from him, especially when you consider the offense is already there. And I think I really understand what scouts were saying when they were talking about Calum Ritchie being a player who translates really well to the NHL. His OHL points didn't light you up in the sense where they weren't in the hundreds like some other players, but scouts always said that the way he plays the game translates better into the NHL. And you can see it quickly where Calum Ritchie gets the puck and he instantly knows where he wants to put it. He knows if he wants to shoot. He knows if there's a pass he wants to make. He is already ready to make the pass. It really reminds you in a way of Brock Nelson, who he was traded for, in a way where Brock Nelson was not the fastest player on the ice, but he always knew what was going on. He was 2 steps ahead. Calum Ritchie seems very similar. Now, he is more of a play-first person rather than a shoot-first player. But I will also note, the shot looks really good. He's a player who has a good shot. I wonder if he is going to shoot a little more now that he is in the NHL, or when he does make the NHL. Now, this whole Pageau situation, I think this is going to be really hard for Calum Ritchie to make this lineup. But if he keeps on having games like this, where he is controlling his line when having NHL wingers, then the Islanders are going to have no choice but to either move JG Pageau or have one of these wingers who really are being passengers so far, have them not make the team and have Calum Ritchie start on the wing, which is something he clarified is not a real big deal for him. Now, another thing he is going to have to improve, and perhaps another reason why it either makes sense to send him down to the AHL for more experience or start him on the wing, is the faceoffs were not good. It was clear that he was struggling in the faceoff, even when he faced off against players who are not great in the dot, like Jack Hughes. He really struggled to win those faceoffs, and that's fine. This is the first time he is going against NHL players in a faceoff dot. And again, everybody he played against in this game is an NHL player or is expected to be on the New Jersey Devils roster, which is why this performance was very exciting for me. I was incredibly impressed with JG Pageau. Now, talking about more of the players who I was not quite impressed with, or really just had a rough game, because to be fair, this was a brutal game, and especially when you talk about the players and how they really struggled to get the puck out of the zone for the Islanders, it was really hard to rank some of the defensemen. But I do want to talk, before I talk about the defense, some of the other players I was not impressed with, and those are Kyle McLean and Mark Gacombe. These are players who are on the fringe of making the Islanders. These are players who can get cut. They know this. They know they're on the outside looking in, and their performance did not really express that. McLean had a good hit early on in the game where he hit Simon Nemec, and after that, he was just silent. And when they were visible, they were making mistakes. Gacombe had a really bad penalty. When he was on the penalty kill, he took a penalty to give the Devils a 5-on-3. Just did not look good. And I especially was hoping for more from Gacombe because I really want him to make this team. And again, it is early in the preseason. I'm not saying this is going to eliminate their chance of making the Islanders, but they're going to have to work from it. And even players like Casey Cizikas did not look that impressive in this game while Callum Richie took advantage of the situation and played a real strong game. Now, Emil Heinemann did look good. That was something I did want to note. He did actually score a goal after Stefan Rosser was talking about, let's see if we'll get a chance to see his quick wrister. Callum Ritchie got the puck on the boards and just knew instantly to give it to Heinemann. It was a really nice goal. And I think Heinemann's a really interesting player. I understand a lot more about his game after watching this. He's similar to Holmstrom, where at least so far, he does not really drive play, but he's very sound defensively. He knows where to be. He's fast, so you notice him a lot. And that makes me wonder if there's a potential for him to eventually develop that more, or if he's just going to be a fourth liner who's just going to be really efficient at finishing his chances. He's not going to be generating them on his own, but with that shot, whenever you get the puck to this player, he is going to finish, and that is something that works on a fourth line. We saw that really with Cal Clutterbuck, and I definitely think that is the floor for what Heinemann is, and I'm really curious now to see how much more he can elevate from this. Because again, this is a 23-year-old player. There's definitely room for him to improve. This is going to be his second season in the NHL, and I did like what I saw from Heinemann. I liked what I saw from Richie. And from the forwards, that was pretty much it. Nobody else in this game was good. And this is not even me trying to be mean. There's literally, I can't even tell you who half the people were in this game. Actual NHL players, I did not pay attention because they just contributed nothing at all the entire time. I think the only time I noticed Gatcomb at all was when he took that bad penalty and another point where he was out of position. Something you're definitely going to want to see him and McLean work on if they want any chance at staying on the Islanders roster. Because again, this is a team that has a lot of people who are impressing in training camp, and you're going to have to do better than that. Now, the defensive side, it was really hard to gauge this game because, again, the puck was in the defensive zone the entire time. We got to see a little bit more of Kashawn Aitchison, and I will say, he did show that he has good defensive positioning, and I am excited to see what he is going to be in the future. But in this game, as opposed to the previous one, he began to show some more of his flaws, where he was fumbling the puck a little bit. I think he was a little more nervous. He's going to be sent down tomorrow. I think it's almost guaranteed that that is the case, or today, when this video is coming out. And that's perfectly fine. He needs another year in the OHL at least, and I think it'll be really good for him to get more experience playing more minutes. So I was really happy with what we saw from him so far. Looking forward to see what he turns into in the near future. Beyond that, there was not much to be excited for on the defense. Isaiah George looked solid, had a few shots on goal. Again, it was hard to really judge the defense because the Islanders were just getting caved in the entire time, but he did make a couple good defensive plays, really helping shut down some of the Devils' top lines. Really would like to see him in a future game playing more of a third line role to get a better gist of whether or not he is ready for the NHL. I was pleased with the performance, but again, you didn't really notice him for big portions of the game, which I guess for a defenseman is a good thing. Alexander Romanov did not look that good in this game, but for him, it's not really a big deal. He kind of has his position sealed in the Islanders lineup. And Kyle Aldilas also did not look very impressive. For the goaltenders, I'm not even going to bring them up because a lot of people on Twitter are bashing the goaltenders after this performance. And to be fair, it was not an incredible game for the goaltenders by any means. But when you get outshot 39-13, I think it's ridiculous to tweet about how the goaltenders were not good. They were getting absolutely shelled. A lot of these were tic-tac-toe type goals on the power play. Really nothing the goaltenders can do. Hogberg, it's the same as last year. He is a good emergency goalie if you really need somebody. Ideally, he's not playing any games in the NHL. That's why you brought Rittich in, so Hogberg does not play. It's good to have him there as well in case you need the option, but that's pretty much that. And Lennox, I felt bad because he let in his first shot again. Kind of stabilized after that, but it's clear that he needs a full year of AHL games, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, this is a goaltender coming off an injury. He's going to need time, but the key takeaway for this game was Callum Ritchie absolutely dominated, and everybody else on the Islanders was just kind of there. Good game from Emil Heinemann, and that's about it. Let me know what you thought about this game in the comments below. Did you watch it? I'm really excited to have Callum Ritchie play a couple more games in the preseason. Based on this game, I think he deserves a spot. It's just gonna be more of a question on what the Islanders can do because you don't want to give up a forward for nothing. It's gonna be really interesting. But again, the way that Mark Gacombe and Hal McLean played in this game, maybe you get Callum Richie in as a winger because yeah, it did not look good, and it's almost to the point where I don't know if I'm even concerned about losing those players if you try to send them down and it doesn't work. That's how little I was impressed, which makes it easier for the Islanders to potentially have Callum Ritchie come up as a wing, maybe even compete with Anthony Duclair for a spot. But let us know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. My name is Patrick Nilan. Catch you on the next episode of Islanders Digest. Let's go, Islanders.